and they're going to talk about their career path and take questions when they're done. Sylvia, take it away.
Actually, I'm going to let Michelle start because when
Okay.
I start, I'll never stop.
Okay. Hi, if everyone can hear me. I'm actually Michelle Chamberlain, so I think it came through wrong on the email. So, so yeah, just a quick overview of career path, like all the way back from the beginning, right? I went to the University of Florida. I'm from Florida, even though I live in Seattle now, and I have an astronomy and physics degree, and got graduated, and a week later I got married because my husband was in Navy ROTC and he was going to get sent away. So we did that, and we moved to Pensacola for flight school right after that. And I was kind of like, okay, what am I going to do? Looked at different grad school options, and I actually ended up getting accepted to the University of West Florida to do my master's degree in computer science. Astronomy requires a lot more schooling, and I decided I was kind of done with that. So time to do something different. So throughout flight school, I worked on my master's degree, and I managed to get about a year into school when he got sent to San Antonio. And I had to take a year off because we moved all over the place during that period of time. So we moved to San Antonio and then Jacksonville, and we finally ended up Whidbey Island, Washington, which is about 2 hours north of Seattle, let's say. So after we got to Whidbey, I was able to work with my school, and I managed to finish my last year and a half as a virtual student for my master's degree. The chair of my department was actually had gotten her PhD from the Naval Postgraduate School, so she was very sympathetic to the situation that I was in, and she worked with me. And so after a much delayed process, I finally graduated. And from there, I took a job as a software engineer at Boeing. And so I worked for 7.5 years at Boeing in Everett, which was a lot of fun because it was an hour commute for me and an hour commute for my husband. We lived halfway in between. And he was active duty and deploying for the first 3 years of that, and then a flight instructor for the next 3 years after that. So we managed to not have to move during that time period, which really helped with the career, but my career was definitely the backseat to his career because the Navy gets what the Navy wants. So as far as what I did at Boeing, I started out actually in structural engineering, writing analysis software for that. And I don't know how far along everyone is in pursuing software engineering, if you're just starting or if you're already looking for a job, but this was very old software. I was working in C and Fortran in code that was written back in the 60s and the 70s, used for original structural analysis of aluminum airplanes and being retrofitted to work for the composite airplanes that they were developing. From there, I actually moved over to the aerodynamics and flight sciences group and did some 3D modeling and started working in Java, which was a fantastic experience. I learned a ton about patterns there, and actually got to go present a few times at the Java 1 conference down in San Francisco. I ended my career at Boeing in what was called the digital transformation, and I worked with a consultancy firm there called Pivotal. And so I actually got to work in downtown Seattle for a while. And that was Java backend, but moving more into web services and JavaScript front end. So kind of got to move all the way through that really old code from the 70s up to modern cloud-based development. About a year ago, I decided that I had done what I wanted to do at Boeing, and I was given the opportunity to move over to Microsoft. So I've been here just over a year. And as part of that, my husband actually left the Navy, so he's no longer active duty. And we have a young daughter, and he is now a stay-at-home dad / substitute teacher, depending on how the day is going. So it's been a big shift because now my career is primary career, and he does all the childcare and takes care of things around the house. So 180 from a few years ago in our life. And here at Microsoft, I work in the Windows build organization in media creation. So we basically take all the compiled bits of building Windows, which is a very daunting task, and we run the the cloud-based service that takes all those bits and puts it into the software that you can actually install onto your computer or install your updates for Windows. That's more of a C# versus Java, obviously. And we work on Azure, and so it's completely cloud-based solution. So does anybody have any questions there? That's kind of just a brief history of what I've done.
I think that's great, Michelle. I think we can all relate to your story for sure.
I know.
So Michelle, I have
yeah.
2 questions. What was your favorite and why?
Sorry about that. Could you repeat the first part of your question?
I said, out of all your roles in Boeing, which one was your favorite and why?
I definitely have to say that my last role at Boeing, which was digital transformation, was my favorite, because I was actually working in a position where I was taking my experience and my skills and working with other, particularly newer, higher engineers, and bringing them up to speed on extreme programming, agile practices, and how to deliver software in that way. And we kind of worked in a very holistic way where we brought the product managers in and we brought designers in, and everybody worked as a small coherent team to deliver software quickly. So that was really gratifying because you could see a lot of results quickly.
Okay, that's good.
So as far as cool science stuff that we got to do, the aerodynamics 3D modeling software was really interesting. We were doing computational fluid dynamics within a simulation. So flight tests or wind tunnel tests in the software. That was a pretty cool solution that we got to work on there.
Awesome.
Michelle, do you have a favorite language?
Or
one that you think you're able to get the most use out of with everything you've done?
Definitely. I definitely still prefer Java. I've been working in C# for the last year, and I feel more at home in Java. I've been using that language for probably about 6 years now, and what I'm learning going over to another object-oriented language is that having been using the language for so long, that I understand more of the background of why things work. So I don't just understand like, oh, this is how you do it, right? And this is the syntax you use. Like I've seen it evolve, and I've seen the committees make decisions about the directions they're going to take the language in. Also, part of getting to go to the Java 1 conference is you get to meet the architects and talk to the architects and the guys that developed the language. And so you can really start to understand the underlying reasons for why you do something a certain way. And C# is very similar to Java, but I don't have that deep understanding of why it chooses to do things a certain way. And so that's what I'm actually working on right now, personally, is just having a deeper understanding of the language. I think once you have that kind of understanding, like you can be happy in any language.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Michelle, at this point in your career, do you find it to be a flexible career? Or on a daily basis?
Yep, I would say work is actually extremely flexible. This is a big difference between Microsoft and Boeing. Actually, Boeing is a salaried position, but they track hours because they're a government contractor. And so you do have to actually track to 40 hours, whereas Microsoft is a more traditionally salaried position. And so you work to get your work done, and you're going to be working approximately 40 hours, but you have much more flexibility in how you get things done, when you get things done. The team that I'm on is great, and I think it's very important if you're looking for that kind of flexibility, particularly around a family, to make sure that you have a team that supports that and understands that. And so team is very big about like, we don't work on the weekends, we don't work late at night. Things happen, occasionally have to be available, but it's the general expectation that you're available during work hours, you're not available not during work hours, and that's normal. So that makes it really flexible because you don't feel like you're constantly on. And if you need a day to do something with your kids, or if you need to take care of personal stuff, then you just tell the team, hey, I'll be out tomorrow, and it's not a big deal. So as far as work culture and flexibility, Microsoft's been fantastic. They are very good about having that balance and in making sure that employees are able to do what they need to do for their life.
That's awesome. Do you have any fully remote team members?
We do not have any fully remote team members. Yeah, not on our particular team. I know it varies team to team, department to department. Mm-hmm. It can be, if you're working remote, I have worked remote in the past, and it can be difficult when it's a hybrid team. If I were looking for a position that I needed to be able to move around, like I'm sure many of you are looking for, that you geographic flexibility, right? Mm-hmm. I personally would look for a team where the vast majority of people were virtual, so that you're not the one or two people not in the office. Mm-hmm. Because when that happens, you tend to be, not intentionally, but you do get left out of things. So if I were to move 100% virtual, I would try to move to a team that was 100% virtual, personally.
Do you find, which work environment do you find that you're able to get more out of, a virtual environment, virtual work, or, in person? As much as personally, I think, having the ability to work remotely 100% of the time to take care of my family, that sort of thing, is ideal. Personally, I work better when I've got, my hands into the mess and I've got people surrounding me who can, answer me right away. Do you find, a stronger benefit to either one of those environments?
Personally, probably very similar to your last statement there, Carly.
Mm-hmm.
Being in the office and being with my coworkers throughout the day, I find that works better for me. So I prefer being in the office. I do occasionally work a virtual day if it's needed, but I find that I'm more productive in the office. The other side of that is that I also feel like it is easier to say, this is work time and this is not work time. So when you're working virtual, it's really easy to be like, oh, well, I did some laundry and I went and ran an errand, and so I'll cook dinner, and then after that I'll do an hour or two, and it's very easy to get into that kind of pattern. And when you go into the office, you say, okay, I'm in the office, I'm working, and then I go home, I'm not working. And so it's much easier personally for me to make that division between home life and work life. And I just make sure that when I'm at work, I make the hours as productive as possible.
Cool. Thank you. Oh, I have one more question. Sorry.
Yeah.
How often do you find, or how often do you take advantage of continuing education? Because I know there's so much to learn and things are constantly changing. Do you find yourself studying on, on downtime, or going to look for new methods, new ways of doing things? How often, how much does continuing education play in part of your career?
So I would say that I actually haven't done a lot of formal continuing education. So I haven't gone and gotten another degree or a certificate, even though that's totally an option. My company would pay for that. But I do find that as a software engineer, that is just part of the job. You're just going to be continuously learning. So it's important to stay up to date on trends and stay up to date on where technology is moving. So I do give myself some time throughout the week to kind of read. There's some technology blogs that I read, some people that I follow as far as trendsetters within languages and technologies. And that way I can kind of make sure that maybe I'm not an expert in something, but I have at least heard of that concept and I have a general understanding of it, so that when I am coming up with a solution and designing something, I have a broader toolbox. And so, maybe I'm designing a solution for something and I'm like, oh, you know what, there was X pattern that I was reading about that they're using over in AWS. I should go look into that and see if that applies to my solution. So you will just find yourself having to learn and keep up on technology because, computer science, it just keeps evolving. So even 7.5 years ago when I started, cloud computing was super novel and, very few people were doing it. And now that's what everything uses. So you have to be able to keep up with that kind of stuff and stay on top of it. A great thing in my department at Microsoft is we have a monthly day of learning. And so we're actually having our day of learning tomorrow. And that is you come into work and you get the entire day uninterrupted to learn whatever you want. So works, they understand that too. And we have a great program for making sure that we have the opportunity to do that kind of stuff. And we do everything from, we've made chatbots to actually doing like deep learning on specific technologies that we know we need to start working with.
I have a question. How do you balance, since you have the military experience, how do you balance all the moving, the deployments, but also still keeping up with the changing technologies as well? Like, how do you balance all of that?
I do try to time box it. So a lot of that I will do at work. So I will spend some time, you come into work, you check your email. And so I might spend a little bit of time reading up on some new technologies that I've seen talked about before I like dive into my deep work for the day.
Mm-hmm.
I do after my daughter goes to bed. So sometimes, you're just hanging out, checking the internet, right? That's a good time to read up on some articles. If you have side projects that you find interesting, right? Like I have an Arduino Nano board, like I play with that. So I do spend a little bit of time doing that, but I do try to keep that division between the two. And so I don't spend all day Saturday studying a new technology or something like that. And I would say that if you are on a team that you feel like you need to be doing that, then you don't have a team that has a strong work-life balance. Mm-hmm. Because everybody has to work on keeping up on technology. So you're not the only one that's having to keep learning. And so there should be the opportunity to do that without taking over most of your home life.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So I have one more question. So what was your interview like at Microsoft, and what did you do to prepare for it?
So there is a green book called Cracking the Coding Interview. That is the secret sauce. So, and pretty much everybody I know will tell you that. That book is it's like lime green. It looks like Jennifer might have one. So, yep.
I have one.
Do those problems. And what's interesting, if you have been out of school for a little while, you will you will remember things that you have not used recently. So it's really good for reminding you about data structures, maybe some memory management, pointers, that kind of stuff that unless you're working in a lower level language that you're not really dealing with on a daily basis, but those questions will come up. I did a standard coding interview loop at Microsoft. So I came in and I did 1 hour with 5 separate people. And so I met my first potential coworker and we spent an hour whiteboarding problems in his office. And then I went to the next person and then I went to lunch with my manager for an hour. And we actually did some coding as part of that. And then I did 2 more rounds of that. And at the end of that, I was able to meet with our director and we did 1 more coding question. So it will be the longest day of straight, like hypothetical coding, very abstract of your entire life. You will be exhausted afterwards. But if you study it, not like memorize what the problems are, but if you study what kind of problems and how to go about solving them, then you will be fine and you will know what to do. So, but it is hard. So.
That whole process just upped my anxiety level.
That sounds really intense. Wow.
Yeah, it is pretty intense, but yeah, you just have to work on knowing how to solve the problems. And I've actually given interviews at Microsoft as well, and it's stressful on this side too. So know that your interviewer is not trying to crack you, and is not trying to, make you slip up. They're actually really just trying to see how you go about the problem solving technique and how you come about getting to a solution. and not so much seeing if you can like memorize the algorithm for X. So.
Cool.
Because I had an interview a month ago for the internship that I am in, or I'm about to be starting, and that was the only stressful part of the interview process. I nailed everything else, and I didn't know what to expect, and I honestly, I should have done a little bit more research, but you know, and I still got the internship because I know the owner of the company, but and he knows I can code, but that's definitely something I need to focus on and work on. So I've already got that book in my Amazon cart. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and I would say that I don't know anybody that doesn't find a coding interview to be stressful. So that's a completely normal feeling. And it is very hard, particularly if you are worried, like if you have some imposter syndrome, you're worried that you're not up to snuff, right? Like it is very emotionally stressful. Everybody experiences that. Another thing to consider is that, you know, there are a lot of tech companies hiring right now, and even just the phone interview is really amazing practice for that. So like I did interview loops at Amazon and at Tableau, and I've given interviews, and so just a lot of like having done it and experienced it helps you not kind of stress out when something happens, right? So I would recommend just as many opportunities as you can make for yourself to try that, do it. Another thing I would recommend is that a lot of places have coding meetups, and they'll have, if I know meetup.com is a big platform for organizing that kind of stuff, but in the Seattle area, there is a handful of coding interview meetups where they go through and do the questions and practice how to do them. So if you are thinking about that and it's something that really stresses you out, go to that kind of stuff and just practice.
That's a really great idea. Actually, we might be able to incorporate that into coffee and code, or code and coffee, however you like to say it. So we can start doing that. I'm taking notes on that right now. So thank you.
Okay, so if everybody has no more questions for Michelle, thank you so much, Michelle. I wrote down everything you said.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I hope that was useful to everyone. And if anyone has any specific questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I think my email's in Zoom, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sylvia, you want to take it away?
I will. I want to thank thank you for doing that. I really appreciate you guys inviting me, but more importantly, I'm so grateful that Michelle did this because she has experience in terms of your journey. So thank you so much, Michelle. You're awesome. And we have to go have some coffee now, because now I have to meet you face to face. So my name is Sylvia Vargas. I've been in some type of software for over 30 years. I'm old and I'm owning it. My current position at Microsoft is as a applied data scientist. And what that means is that I work a lot with data, and I do a lot of various coding with SQL and Python, a little C#. But my role is really to get the data, talk to people, what problems do we need to solve, figure out how to get the data into our various databases, how do we clean it up, and how do we do some either basic statistics, basically how much do they have, or basic counts, and then maybe apply some, machine learning algorithms for the business to basically learn better. So my journey started over 30 years ago. I graduated from school in New York City called Fordham, and my undergraduate degree is in information systems and operations research. And so from there, I actually got a job. I interviewed a lot of places. I interviewed like 15 different places, and I got several offers. And I went to a company called Texaco. And back in the day, the languages that were prevalent were Fortran, COBOL, and some assemblers. So this is back in the ancient days. And so my journey, and I've had a lot of companies. I'm going to put my LinkedIn, that way you can see all the companies I've worked with. I've worked a lot. My journey has been always learning new technologies and to kind of meet the new thing. I wouldn't be in my role now if I didn't keep trying to keep learning. It's not always perfect, but I kind of went from that perspective to C. I then went more into, when I moved from New York City, I went to Midwest. I lived in Kansas City for 3 years, working for a bank, because there's some people from New York that went there and brought me along, and that was great. And then I got married. My husband was originally from Seattle, and as the company we went there in the Midwest wasn't doing well, we just, then his father died. I made the adulthood decision that we needed to come to Seattle since he's originally from Seattle. I interviewed different places, and it was very hard for me to find a job out here, actually, because even though I was doing C programming, they wouldn't. It was kind of interesting. They would ask me questions that were really illegal. They'd ask me if I was pregnant or was planning to be pregnant. They asked me if I was married. They asked me all these things. It was kind of like, I can't believe this. So that was challenging. So this was in the early 90s. So one thing led to another, and I persisted, and I got a consulting gig with Boeing because I applied with this consulting group, and they had a contract with Boeing, and they were looking for people that had Oracle. And so I have a lot of database experience. That's kind of where my data science journey has gone. And so I did a phone interview. They liked my answers. And literally it was a 5-minute conversation talking about Lucky, because I answered the questions, I guess, effectively for the gentleman. And 2 weeks later, I flew out to Seattle to live with my mother-in-law for 6 months before my husband moved out, and started at Boeing. And at Boeing, I worked on a lot of different projects. I was at Boeing for 3 years. At the time, I was mostly dealing with software to do things like maintenance manuals for different airlines. Later on, I was on projects that dealt with the parts, and the project called DCAC, which literally was to try to automate and consolidate all the parts and manufacturing the costs of airplanes. And after almost 4 years there, there was this thing called the internet. And I wanted to learn about that. I wanted to do, I wanted to be involved in that journey. And because I was getting bored after a while there. And so, I was doing well at Boeing, but I wanted to learn new technology. I'm kind of always interested in new stuff. And so I went to Oracle for a while because they told me, oh, we'll get you in the internet stuff. But what they really wanted was for my Oracle experience, which is fine. I got paid well, but it wasn't, it was a lot of travel. And I like sleeping in my own bed. So from there, I went to different startups. I actually worked for a startup that was one of the most exciting places. I developed an advertising system in the early internet days for Disney. As part of this small company called Starwave. And I did this. That was probably one of the most exciting adventures in my career, because I got to learn a lot of stuff with the internet startups, learned about new technologies, got to do some Java, did more data, web pages and stuff like that, and Microsoft technologies. That's where I learned about SQL Server. And from there, I just kind of kept evolving. There was, after the internet bust, people lost their jobs. So they were cutting back where I was going. So I did a lot of jobs doing consulting, which is fine. And I have so many jobs, so it's kind of like I'm just going over. So at one point I worked for about over 3 years at this company called Alstom. It's a French company that the group that I was in designed software to manage the power plants across all over the world, really. But the division we were in was basically writing software to help power plant management in the United States, like in the Midwest, Florida Power and Light, California. So I did that for 3 years, and that was very challenging because it was very interesting to figure out how does power move and how do you actually calculate the reserves and throughput. So that's fascinating. There was a big layoff December of 2007. So I got some time off, and in that time I started researching some things. The one challenge there was I became a manager, and I had been a manager in different parts of my life, but I always stayed technical, and I'm glad I did, because if I wasn't technical, it would have been very hard to get a job. So so about 2.5 months later, I got a call from IBM and Microsoft to do consulting in data space, because that's what I'm really good at. And I decided to take the Microsoft offer, and I was in consulting for about 2.5 years. And then I got an opportunity to move internally to various internal MSIT sites, what they call internal technology. So I was doing data analytics for, before Azure, our cloud service, there was an internal cloud piece that we were prototyping. So I worked on that group to do internal cloud stuff for various internal organizations at Microsoft. And after about 3 years of doing that, I decided that I needed to, I really was wanting to get into the big data space. And I didn't see the opportunity. I didn't see the opportunity, didn't find opportunities to learn about that. So I made a decision to leave the company, and I did various small jobs that got me back into data space versus administrative cloud piece there, because I wanted to do more coding. And so I got to do that. So in my 4-year hiatus from Microsoft, I did various jobs. I got into big data and just did a lot of great stuff. And actually in the cloud, worked in several companies that were developing their own cloud service. Much smaller in competition to Amazon. But I learned a lot of the fundamentals. That was great. So I came back to Microsoft because some people that I met in my journey in those 4 years in the various cloud companies I was working at, they brought me back to Microsoft. So, and here I am. And so I'm doing right now analytics for the data centers such that we can get enough machines and power and servers to basically help get all these applications on Azure.
I had a question. Does Microsoft allow you to move positions within the company?
Yes.
Now? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, if they're not comfortable or you don't feel that you're being stretched, you can do internal interviews, and you can ask for what we call informationals and talk to people. They have a career site. I mentor a lot of women here in Microsoft as well as outside, because if you're not in a place that you don't feel, as Michelle said, you don't feel supported. And she was very wise in what she was saying, and actually I wrote down some notes because that was her wisdom was great. Because if you don't feel that you're in the right team, you don't have the right dynamics, and if you don't have the right communication skills, because that's, I think, sometimes the key. If you don't feel part of the team for whatever reason, after a while, there's only so much you can change. You just learn from the situation and move on. I think that's been the journey of my life is, things happen, and you just have to move on, and you just learn from the experience. It's not good or bad. It's just is what it is, and move on, and something you learn more the next place. So yes, Microsoft does that.
So I have a question for Sylvia. How do you know that data was for you? And I'm asking from the perspective of, I was at an interview once, and the hiring manager told me that you're a data guy, aren't you? And I was like, how did you know? He's like, the way you ask your questions. So yeah, I'm leaning towards that way just because he pointed it out. I was like, that's a good idea. Why didn't I think of that?
It's and I think the way I learned it. So the way I actually got into my software path was in college. I I didn't want to be poor anymore. I'm the poor kid from the Bronx, and Hispanic family, la da 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 da. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to be a teacher. Then I looked at the prices and I'm going, and especially in New York, I didn't want to be poor anymore. So I go, okay, I'm going to be an interpreter for the UN. Then I looked a great teacher that I had in college was taking Italian. You're great, Sylvia, but they can get any Tom, Dick, and Harry off the streets of Europe that speaks Spanish, Italian, French. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go do accounting because I was really great at math, hated accounting. And by luck, I went to the statistics class. That's where was my first programming class. And I liked the programming, but I liked the data of it, but I didn't realize it there. And so what I realized through time, every job that I got is I'm interested in the processing, but I'm interested in the processing to get the data, right? That was just my perspective. And I work with great guys here. I'm the only woman in my team, which seems to be like a thread in my life, but that's just the way it is. But there's just something that I can look at the pattern and I can say, oh, this is what it's meaning. And I can run statistical things and I just love it. And if that's what it reads to you, it was very slow learning because I just realized that people were just mostly interested in how to process stuff to get it out. And I'm interested in how to process out to understand what things we could do with it later on. So it was just more of an awakening than actually knowing.
I do have another question. So what's the difference between data engineering and software engineering? Like at its fundamental core, like what's the difference?
Everybody has a different opinion of this. Data engineering is the processing of data to various repositories to do various analytics later on. To me, software engineering is really to solve a problem. It could be as software engineering. You need software engineering to do data engineering, right? You're not a data engineer without being a software engineer because those are the tool sets. But the data engineering is really the processing of data to make an outcome. So like software, and Michelle, I'm actually interested in what Michelle's perspective is. Because to me, software engineers can create great websites, create machine learning. It's kind of like the engine. So software to me is kind of like the engine in a car. Data engineering cares about not only the engine of the car, but the fuel that goes out, if that makes any sense, right? You don't only care about the engine, you care about the fuel that's going into the engine and processing out. Michelle, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'd say that's actually a pretty good analogy. The software engineering is more interested in like, how do you create the solution? How do you design and engineer the solution? It's not so much about analyzing large scale data sets that are coming in and out and like what those numbers look like.
And my last question is there a role that's a hybrid between the two? Because I'm also interested in robotics, and that's more the software engineering side and the more engineering, like mechanical aerospace and whatnot.
Every job, even at Microsoft, so it depends, right? I think that I believe that in 5 years, what we know as data scientists and data engineering is going to change. But that's true. The industry is just changing so fast. I think everything is going to be a hybrid of that. So I would just say is, yes, there is always a hybrid. It's just you have to get the skills and then find the opportunity that has that. Because right now it's very nebulous. If you go to one company to another, they go and say, oh, a data engineer is a business analyst, or a data engineer is someone that does reports. And so there's really inconsistent, and Microsoft, there's even inconsistence of what that means. Like sometimes they say, oh, a data scientist just spends his whole day or her whole day just writing algorithms. Well, no, there's a whole pipeline, right? You can't create an algorithm without understanding the data. So it's just really a different thing. So I would just say keep your journey, stay technical in software with the idea of saying, learning the big data and the different data platforms, because what is the quote unquote the standard today is going to change anyway. So I really believe having fundamental software engineering skills will help you in that journey.
I have a question. As my background is I'm a career change. I have a BA in communication, and I'm currently getting an AAS in computer applications programming. The one thing I have noticed, though, is that I have very weak math skills. The last time I took a math course was in college the first time, so 20 years ago. And I think finance, I took, finance course, and I just took college algebra. I haven't taken a math course yet in my program, but it looks like I'll have to take at least statistics at a minimum. I know math is I have noticed math is very important in this field. Do you have any recommendations, or where do you start? Where would you start? What should you focus on? Yes.
So I'm always learning, and to be quite frank, I'm studying the various machine learning. I literally have a book on various machine learning stuff, and my luck is that my husband, who's retired now, his idea of a fun time is taking math classes, and I kid you not, and figuring out various algorithms. So I have been fortunate that I have my own math tutor at home. Having that said, he's a great teacher for people that is not me. He's like actually helping tutor, and that's great. You know how it is. Your spouse is really great, but them teaching you or you teaching them doesn't always work. So what I do, my best friend is Coursera, also Khan Academy, KHAN Academy. If there is a lot of, so we all have some form of imposter syndrome. People who say that they're confident 1,000% of the time are lying. So I go out and I go and take some online classes. And even if I know the stuff, I take and I maybe speed up the sound and just, because part of it is, it's a self-confidence, and also you just need to get maybe some just reviewing it. And I find that some of these online courses help. Some it's hit and miss, but that's what I would do. And that way you can just review it, and build your confidence. And then you'll just find, oh, I need to learn this. Because if somebody were to say, this is the straight line to learn from A to B, I'm not sure there's always that straight line. So start where you feel that you're not as confident. And if you're starting a statistics class, go again. Khan Academy, it's not only was originally developed to help kids in grade school and high school to do things, but now they actually have college courses as well as GED testing. So feel free to reach that. edx.org is another good one. Coursera, there's a lot of these classes. You don't have to pay a fee if you just audit them, and just start there. And start where you just take a self-assessment. I don't feel confident about X. And I go through that exercise every day. And I say, okay, what do I need to learn, or where should I start? And just start someplace.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think your story is so interesting, Sylvia, and I wish brains were like computers and I could just download all the knowledge that you have.
You're sweet. It's just a function of age. It's just a function, and I've taken my friends always go and say, I've taken a lot of risks, and I do have, by the way, I do have stepchildren, but it's different to be a stepmom than it is a mom, because they have a great mom and we shared custody, so I can understand but not really full-time as being a full-time mom. My sister is. My stepdaughter is a Navy doc down in Florida, but I don't know how to, other than tell everybody to just keep trying. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
Can you tell us about your how your team works? Because I think it would be interesting for us to see. We heard how Michelle's team works. How is yours?
So my team is it's a team of 8. I'm the only woman, and it's really it's actually data focused. So we've divided into a team that does ingestion, which is called basically getting data from A to B, right? And we have different platforms. So we call that that could be going back to the gentleman who's asking about data engineering. That's some in data engineering, but they really care about the engine that moves various data of different sources from A to B in a way to do that. The other, so that's a couple guys there. Another team is really doing what we call validation. So this is kind of an engine such that we can go validate data or create alerting. It's kind of like messaging. So that's a couple of guys there. We've got a couple of project managers that are recent to the group that are kind of helping us gather requirements with the customers, do the writing and stuff like that. Myself and a couple other guys are what we call data scientists, or applied data scientists. I consider us mostly business intelligence right now because we're not doing as much data science as I want. Basically, we take that data and we figure out how to merge the various data sets and then present to management or give various groups ways to do reporting such that they can figure out the best ways to manage the system. Like, oh, we're going to have, how to alert more efficiently if there's a delivery that's going to be late, that's going to impact our ability to do X, or alerting if there's data changes on one side that affect the bottom line of the other. So right now, that's how our team is divided. We're mostly in the office. I will work from home when I need to focus, because we all get pulled into various meetings, which is all good. But, after X number of days or hours and days of discussions and arguments and, not bad arguments, just difference of opinions, how to do that, my brain goes, I need to focus and get the actual work done. So that's what I do. And I also, my rhythm is I get up early. I after the coffee, check my email. That way I can prepare for my day, do my other stuff, then drive in. That way I'm prepared for doing that. And I'll check my email at night just to see what other emergencies are happening. In our team, we're on call. We rotate our on-call capability. So I'm on call now every 6 to 8 weeks, depending. So basically, if there's any failure in any of our systems that are running live, we get a page and or an email thing. So we go check it out. If it's high priority, we'll respond quickly and or at least address the situation and correct whatever the problem is.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I actually had a question in regards to, Sylvia, how maybe your interview process compared to Michelle's on the data side versus.
Yeah. It was, I've actually had my first, this is my second tour of duty at Microsoft, like I said. So my first interview was similar, and so that was now 12 years ago. Yeah, 12 years ago. So it was similar to what Michelle said. I didn't have 5 rounds, but I did have 3 rounds of testing. This was before the Green Book, which I'm very jealous about. And so it was literally discussing ideas. Could I whiteboard a solution? In that particular case, they were testing me on my SQL as well as at the time my minimal C#, but I passed it, so who knows? And also my data design. So they'll pose to me a question like, this is the data that we have. How would you put it together? And how would you calculate X, Y, and Z given this? So I'm really good at that. I mean, that's just not, I don't have to, they'll test me on some stuff in SQL a lot. The blessing that I have, I've been doing SQL since 1985. So it's been, I kind of know it. So that's just the blessing for me. The challenge that I have is that I want to be a little more versed. Well, I am doing some C#, but not as much as I like to, because there's just something really cool about creating a piece of code and it runs. So that's different. So that's been, in general, that's how the data pieces are. But I will say I've had interviews in other companies where, if you're a data engineer, your first priorities is to understand how to do the software engineering, which is perfectly fine, as well as do that. So it depends on the group.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
So I have one last question for the both of you. How did you guys approach negotiation in your interviews? And I guess over time with all your other roles?
Michelle?
So when my first offer, which would have been from Boeing, I was pretty excited just to get a position. This was Sylvia talked about getting laid off in 2007, and I graduated in 2008 when all of that was still going on. So an offer was a rare occurrence, so I was just excited. So I didn't negotiate at that point in time. Also, I was just new, right? For my second position, moving to Microsoft, I will say that Microsoft seems to offer very generous salary offers, right? They don't seem to lowball those offers, and so the offer made was what I was expecting. They do offer relocation if you need relocation, and so I didn't need to move, and so I did negotiate some of my starting benefits based on not needing to be moved across country. But most times I've gotten an offer, it's been in line with the salary I was expecting to start with. So I haven't had to do any like hardline negotiating for that kind of stuff.
So I suck at negotiating. What I do is I don't even like bartering when you go to some place. I'm just easy that way. So what I've done is in my career, I would just say, this is the salary that I have. This is what I'm doing. I'm expecting at least X percentage above this. Now in some companies, it's not allowed for them to ask you how much you make. So that's always a challenge. When I got laid off back in the time, Microsoft did lowball me. There's no question about that. And so I just said, I was just at that point, I literally had two offers from IBM and Microsoft. And I said, look, I have this competitive piece. I'm not going to tell you what they've got. They're going to give me, but it's a lot more. So, so then they came back and did that. And so, because I just don't bluff well at all. So that's just the way I do it and I would just say that there are other people that are better at it. So really just know your worth online. And then talk to others in the industry to basically have that conversation.
I don't know, from that description, sounds like you're pretty good at it. But I think know your worth is great. And I feel like us starting out, I mean, we probably feel our worth is less than it is, the whole imposter syndrome, like you said.
Well, also, it's just insecurities. I mean, we're all, even, at my age, I get insecure. It's just part of living. I would just say is you want to get experience. So if you can find something part-time to get experience, that will always give you, having something that's kind of related, even if it's part-time, even if you're doing freelance, that counts. That counts in terms of being something. And also, I know people that have had very there's is it, I forget I'll remember the group and I'll send you guys the email.
Mm-hmm.
There's an organization where you can do freelance software online, and people have various experience. It could be really good or really bad, but you may want to try that, because if you do some freelance stuff, then you have a negotiation power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think sometimes the first job is really, you're just grateful to get anything. But after you get experience, just know your worth.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Anna says in the chat, Michelle and Sylvia, are you ever at the Girl Geek dinners?
Those are a ton of fun, and I managed to make them about once a quarter.
I never heard of that.
I have not. I actually heard of. I started hearing about them about last month, and I have to subscribe to one of them because I have to show up. It's just that that whole free time. Seems like even though my stepchildren are grown and one of them has grandchildren, taking care of my husband is actually more work than taking care of the two kids. So I don't know. Well, I need to get to that.
I will say it's a lot of fun to see the different offices downtown.
Well, Michelle, I'm gonna hit you up and you're gonna nag me to go.
Okay.
All right. So it's been an hour. That went fast. So does anybody have any final questions? Nope. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sylvia and Michelle. I can't tell you how helpful that 60 minutes was for me personally. And I'm
Well,
sure
let us know, and if you need more people, I'll scrounge people. Not to worry. If you want, anything we could help in your journey, because
Okay.
I'm really excited for all of you. You rock, and so please keep in touch and let us know how we can help your process.
Thank you so much.
Even if it's actually doing some interviews, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
gosh.
Michelle has examples, and I'm not that great at it, but hey, I can give hard questions like anybody else.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Please keep in touch, ladies and gents.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.